You got yourself a RICOH GR. Congratulations. Now, this video is going to help you learn the basic functions and do a deep dive into the menu of the RICOH GR. All right, here's your power button. Turn on and off. Shutter button, 2 stages. Half press to focus, full press to capture. Front dial typically controls your aperture. We'll get into that in just a moment. Mode dial chooses your mode. You have to press this lock down to unlock it and then turn. Back here, we have the adjust dial, which is a flick dial, kind of like those old MP3 players. You go back and forward like that. Minus, plus. Playback button here. If you press and hold it when the camera is off, turns on the camera in playback mode without extending the lens. We have our function button back here. It can be customized. Little dial over here to use as a dial, but also as buttons. And each of those, when you're in shooting mode, has its own function, like macro, frame mode, white balance, and ISO. We have a display button that changes our display mode, brings more detail if you press it several times, and then it goes back to the main mode. And then we have our menu button. Simple as that. As far as the modes are concerned, real quick, program mode automatically decides the exposure of the scene. Aperture mode allows you, and in fact only you, to change the aperture, and everything else is automatic. You see, as I move the dial, aperture gets tighter and then more open once I go back. Shutter speed priority mode. Same dial, instead of aperture becomes your shutter speed dial. I don't love this. I like my shutter speed to be back here, which is why I use manual mode when I want to do that. So aperture stays in the front, and then shutter speed is your adjustment dial back here. I just wanted to real quick make sure you know all of that. There's a movie button on the side. You press it once, it does one thing. You press and hold it, it does another thing. We'll get to all of that later. So let's go to the menu. You press the menu button, and on the first page, the very first thing you see is your focus. Pretty important. Let's just go over the different ones. Auto area focus is completely automatic. It just picks an area, or, well, if face is on, face detection. If it sees a face, it focuses on the face. Otherwise, it automatically decides where to focus, and that's how you focus. Auto area center is the same thing, but keeps the focus area in the center of the frame, so it won't focus on anything around the edges. We have zone select AF. It's a new feature. I don't love it, but basically you select a zone and it keeps the focus in that zone. You select a zone and it keeps the focus in that zone. It won't focus on anything outside of that zone. All right. Select AF is simple as that. You select and you focus. Pinpoint AF, it's even a smaller point. So let's say I want to focus on the lock on that box over there. There you go. Pinpoint. Tracking AF keeps track of your subject as you move your frame, as you can see. All right. Continuous AF, as you press and hold halfway, it keeps focusing. You move, it continually tries to find a new point to focus on. Okay. And we have manual focus. If you're in manual focus, you're going to have to press the macro button here. You press up, and then it brings you into manual focus mode, which then allows you to use this dial here to manual focus. You go through the entire range. Now we're infinity, all the way back down to 30 centimeters. And then once you go beyond 30 centimeters, then you're in the macro range, basically, closer stuff. And there you go. Yeah, all the way down to 6 centimeters. As you can see, my hand right there is pretty much in focus. All right. So those are the focus modes. Let's put it back into my favorite mode, which is auto area center. It's the most reliable That's my recommendation. All right, face and eye detection. That's it. It's either on or off. It detects a face. You can also set it on use only in auto area AF, which means if you're in other settings besides the auto area AF, it won't activate. I always keep it on, always on. AF assist light is this little light in the front, a little green light over here that turns on when there isn't enough light to focus on your subject. I can't quite make it do it because it's very bright in this room, but you get the idea. You've seen that before. You can leave that on. I usually actually turn that off. If you leave it on, it has that little star. It shows you it's on. Snap focus distance. Ladies and gents, this camera features snap focus, as you know. So let's say we're here and we don't want to focus and shoot. We just want to shoot. Boom. It snaps to, in this case, infinity focus. I think I have it set. But you just press and it takes the picture in a snap with a predetermined focus. And you can set that distance. 2.5 meters is the classic. Infinity is another classic. The rest of them are also pretty good. Another way you can adjust your snap focus distance is by holding the macro button, and then while holding it, use the front dial to adjust. You see that? Boom, we're back to 2.5 meters. Now if you just press the macro button, it'll take you to macro mode. You can focus on macro objects. And if you want to do that other thing again, you have to come out of macro mode and then press and hold and then adjust your snap focus distance. All right. So there's that. Full press snap, on or off. I leave it on. That's the thing I just showed you, full press snap. So if you just full press without half pressing, it will take a picture at your predetermined snap focus distance that you saw here. All right. There's that. Focus peaking is for your manual focus. It highlights the edges of the subject you're focusing on. If you turn it on with highlight edge, I'll show you real quick. We go to manual focus and demonstrate that for you. It's a very subtle effect. You see, just the edges of things just pop up real quick. And if you're manual focusing, see? You see it kind of highlights the edges of what you're focusing on and makes it shine. So it makes it easier to get your manual focus. That's all there is to focus peaking. I just leave it off because I don't manual focus that often. And when I do, I actually want to see the image rather than the peaking. All right. Let's just see, AFC setting. Let's just read this. Determines whether to prioritize focus tracking performance or frame per second rate. Okay, so I like to make sure I get as many pictures as I want if I'm in a continuous shooting mode. So I'd rather have the camera prioritize that rather than wanting to get the focus right on every shot. But you can change that if you'd like. Manual focus auto magnification. I've turned it off. You noticed when in manual focus, I have to press and hold the display button to go to this zoomed in mode. There's that. I leave it off. If you turn it on, when you go to manual focus and turn the dial, it just automatically zooms in real fast. It's helpful if you're a big manual focuser. I am not, so I leave it off. Exposure mode. All right, so when you're in a custom mode, you can change the exposure mode rather than having to turn the dial to your exposure mode. You can change it in the menu and basically have your custom mode be an aperture priority or be a manual mode. In my case, I'm in this particular custom mode. It's a program mode. Your AE metering is how your camera decides to light the scene. You can either have it be a multi-segment, which is the fully automatic. It just judges the entire scene and decides how to light it. It tends to go for the slightly brighter in my experience. Let me just go back to my normal focus mode here or just refresh. So I put it on center weighted because it just makes it just a tiny bit darker, and I like it a tiny bit darker. Also, while we're talking about metering, your adjust dial here, if you didn't know, is what helps you adjust your exposure. You want to go underexposed or overexposed, it's up to you. All right, then we have your ISO settings. Let's talk about that real quick, because it's not only the automatic setting or individual ISO that you choose, it's also allowing us to choose an upper limit and a lower limit. So you can do interesting things like I've done here. So pretty much in this case, I only capture photos with either 10,000 or 12,800 ISO. Well, if I put this back on auto. But you can set your limit. So you can set your lower limit. This is a more normal version of this would be lower limit 100, upper limit, let's say 4,000, right? If you want to avoid having grainy, noisy pictures. And it also, under the ISO settings, remember this, it's not under a different setting. You have a minimum shutter speed setting. Very useful for you street photographers out there. You can set this at 250 or even 400 or 500. It means you whip the camera out, you take the shot real quick with your snap focus. You have all sorts of hand movement. You still get a nice crisp shot because of your high minimum shutter speed of 1/500th of a second. Well, I don't worry about, sling snapshotting that much. So 160 does it for me. Flash mode. If you're a flash photographer, you can kind of, set your exposure compensation for your flash, but also you have your red eye and speed sync and red eye slow sync options as well. I don't shoot flash much, so there's that. Program line setting. This is an interesting one. Your normal, so this is basically telling the camera how to decide what to decide to prioritize when choosing the exposure of the camera. The normal mode is just automatic. So program mode basically decides neutral light with a decently wide aperture and a decently fast shutter speed to capture the photo. You can also tell it to prioritize maximum aperture all the time. So you want to make sure you get shallower depth of field with your closer focus distance and your 2.8 aperture, you put it on that. If you want the exact opposite, if you want to have no shallow depth of field, you want to prioritize having focus on close objects and on faraway objects altogether, then you can select depth of field priority. Very useful for street photography again. If you choose depth of field priority, it means your camera is going to choose tighter apertures. So 5.6, f8, f11 to give you that deeper depth of field look. So you don't have to worry about your focus so much, right? Everything's in focus. Excellent. So, auto EV compensation. I like this setting because it allows you to shift the given AV TV value in maintaining suitable exposure. What does this mean? It means that if I am, let's say, in manual mode, right? And I decide an f4 and, 1/200th of a second, and I just go take the picture. If the camera decides, well, in this case, it didn't do it, but if it decides maybe 250 is proper with the ISO I've chosen, it'll just do it if it's a little change. So that's what that is. Okay. Link auto exposure and auto focus point together. Well, it's pretty clear what that does. Exposure is biased on the focus point. I leave it off because I like having things separate. Keep them separated. All right. There's your white balance settings. Thanks to awesome modern camera technology, for the most part, you can leave it on white balance, but you can also mess with things if you want to create certain colors and stuff. See, I've done a little color shift here. For things like that, you can press the function button and go crazy. It's not going crazy. You just have a dial here that moves you through the colors, right, in 4 directions, and it's kind of like a color filter. You decide the vibe. If we want to go a little blue-greenish today, let's see. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And we take that vibe and we take maybe a lower exposure photo of this notebook, and yeah, not bad. Not bad. That's a vibe. See what we did? There you go. So that's white balance. For the most part, besides the shenanigans I just described with the color shifts and stuff, I like to leave mine on multi-auto white balance or on regular white balance. And then you have your classics if you really want to like mess with white balance. For most people, leave it on multi-auto. That's all I have to say about that. But if you're a film guy and you like just to explore your different white balance vibes and stuff, go for it. You can do a lot here, and you can set custom white balances. As you can see, I have a few set for me for different vibes. Let's just try one here real quick. You see what I mean? It helps you create an extra layer on top of your film simulation by shifting your white balance. So if you want to do extra creative things with your color, there is that. It's under white balance. Otherwise, leave it on auto. Auto white balance and tungsten light. You know how digital cameras have this tendency to go really yellow if you're indoors? That helps you undo that. That's why I leave mine on high. You can put it on low. I like mine on high. All right. Still movie mode. Very obvious. Are we taking pictures or are we making movies? Taking pictures. Snap distance priority. This is a new setting they introduced. I don't use it much. If you turn this on, it overtakes your entire exposure mode. It's a completely, let's just try it. It performs shooting with the aperture according to subject distance and depth of field specified in advance. This is for you hip shooters out there, for you street photographers. Again, it completely, so look, I'm in manual mode, but it completely overtook my manual mode. I no longer am in manual mode. I'm in snap priority mode. What is it? Well, it's telling you. The front dial gives you a few options for your focus distance. And look, it changes it live on the lens and you can feel it. So you got infinity 5 meter, 3.5, 2.5, 2 meter, 1.5, 1 meter, and 30 centimeters. So like your snap distances. However, on top of that, you get a depth of field gauge now. You get 3, 2, or 1. And see what happens when I go to 3, it tightens up the aperture for me. What basically this does is if you put it on depth of field 1, it's lower depth of field. There's no focus in this. You see, if I half press, nobody's focusing anything. This is a snap mode. So we are snapped at 5 meters or at 3.5 meters or at 2.5 meters. And then I control the amount of aperture the camera decides to dial in. How tight we want the depth of field is determined by how high I go depth of field 1, 2, or 3. 3 being the highest depth of field. You see it's choosing f6.3 at the same 2.5 meter distance for depth of field 3. If I go back to depth of field 1, f3.2, much wider aperture. All right. So that's snap distance priority. It's a feature Ricoh brought into the cameras. It's cool for walking around taking pictures. I don't use it much. Macro mode, on or off. They've given us the option as a button here, so I don't know why it's in the menu, but it's good to have it. So same thing as pressing up. Takes you to macro mode. Drive mode. It's the same thing as this button over here. We have a self timer. Very self-explanatory. We have also the ability to choose single frame shooting or continuous shooting. This is cool because look how many pictures I just took. 4. And it's taken a second to process that. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can have continuous shooting. And using this same shortcut button here takes you exactly there. I'm going to put it back on single frame. But we also have these cool things. Bracketing. Do you know what that is, ladies and gents? Yes. So exposure bracketing. You can tell the camera to basically, instead of just one picture at one exposure, take 3 pictures, one exposure a little bit lower, one exposure a little bit higher, one exposure in the center. And you can change and mess with that here. It's a kind of an interesting feature. I don't mess with it. Multi-exposure, multiple exposure. It's kind of a cool creative feature. So let's just try it here. So we get one, and then once you have your one picture, see, next shot, it aligns it with, let's just go completely different direction, or just go crazy. Let's do a doubler. And then you align and you take your second shot, and then the camera automatically combines both, or even more. You know, you can put a third shot in there. Let's do a third shot while we're at it. And it combines all of those into one shot. Kind of a cool creative feature if you're into that. Look, we have 3 coffee cups here for some reason now. Anyways, you get it. It's cool. It's cool. Some film cameras had this feature back in the day. Well, not with 3. Well, probably you could rig it. So there's that. This you want to keep turned off. This is an anti-aliasing filter simulation. What's an anti-aliasing filter? Just for those who don't know, it blurs up your image a little bit to help reduce this weird effect that I can probably show you a little bit here. You see those lines going through? If a screen on screen effect kind of thing happens. So to undo that, or screen on texture, screen on fabric, or the sensor against fabric, that kind of thing, to counteract that, camera manufacturers usually put like a blurring, almost like a fuzzying filter in front of the sensor. This camera doesn't have it. That's why the images are so crisp and sharp. Now, you can have the software try and fake one for you if you're worried about getting those patterny patterns I talked about, right? Usually with fabrics, or if there's a ton of screens and stuff around, I don't worry about that and I leave it off. All right, HDF. My version of this camera, rather than having an ND filter, a neutral density filter on the inside, has an HDF filter. You can turn it on or off. Here, there's also shortcut ways of doing it. We can talk about that later. When it comes in, you know, with factory setup is the function button, but I've changed it. All right, your file format, JPEG or RAW plus JPEG. It's up to you. JPEGs are awesome. RAW images are full of data. If you're a big photo editor, that's what you use. All right. Aspect ratio, don't mess with it unless you're very into square photography. So, you know, you get a square aspect ratio. I like crop actually because it extends the ability of this camera to not just be a 28mm equivalent camera, but also a 35 and a 50. And of course, these are crops into the sensor, so the resolution will be less. You go from 24 megapixels to roughly 7 megapixels for the 50mm, and then 16 megapixels for the 35mm crop. I have those set as a shortcut to my side button here, so when I press once, it goes to my crop. So you get once for 35, once for 50, and another one back to 28. But we can talk about those shortcuts once we get to that menu. But for the most part, I leave it off. I like my 28mm setting here. All right, this is our JPEG size: large, medium, small, extra small. I keep it on large to get the full image, the full resolution image. Color space, leave it on sRGB. All right, image control is all your film simulations. And look, it's a wonderful thing to play around with. I'm going to just cover it real quick. We're not going to do a deep dive on it here, but generally speaking, you have your standard vivid black and white, which is monotone, soft black and white, hard black and white. You see, it's more contrasty. High contrast black and white and hard black and white are two different kinds of black and white. So explore the differences between those. We have negative film, kind of like a faded color vibes. We have positive film, a very saturated, more saturated, somewhat faded, more contrasty film vibes. My favorite. And we have bleach bypass. These are the old school kinds, you know, retro, HDR, cross processing, and a couple of custom settings that you can set for yourself. What are these things? If you don't know, it's basically you choosing to have predetermined ways of treating color, shadows. It's like a film simulation. So you press the function button and it gives you all the details of it. So you can set a saturation. You can set a hue. High low key adjustment just kind of does that high key, contrasty thing with your highlights. But you also have general contrast adjustment, highlight and shadow contrast adjustment, sharpness, shading, which adds like a vignette if you want, or the opposite of one, clarity adjustment, and that's pretty much it. So you get all of these little details that you can mess with just within one film simulation. So it allows you to have all sorts of different colors that you can flip between by choosing your film simulation. It's also available as a shortcut in your adjust menu. You press the adjust button and there's right there is your image control. And using this dial in the front, you can quickly cycle through them in the moment and say, I want to do black and white. And, you take your awesome black and white picture. All right. Simple as that. So that's a real quick thing on image control, aka film simulation. Peripheral illumination correction. Turn it off. What is it? There's a natural vignette to this lens. You see the edges of the image are just kind of dark. If you turn that on, the camera with its software attempts to undo that, as you can see. And it does an okay job. Me personally, I don't love it. Why? Because when you go mess with the picture later in the post, you can see where the edges they did it, and the gradation is kind of visible. So I leave it off. Dynamic range correction. We have highlight correction and shadow correction. I leave both on auto. The thing that it does is it's correcting highlight overexposure and shadow underexposure. It's helping you brighten the dark parts of the photo and darken the too bright parts of the photo. And you can have on or off or auto low, medium, high when it comes to the shadow correction. I leave it on auto. If you put it on high, you get that sort of HDR look. I'm not into it. So auto on both. Noise reduction. This is when and where the camera tries to soften up the grain and color noise that you get when you go with higher ISO, as well as like a little bit of hand movement blurriness that you get. So I turn all of this off because, number one, I love the grain I get with this camera. So no worries there. It looks amazing. I love the grainy texture here. Number two, I actually control the hand movement thing with the shutter speed anyway. And I'm not too worried about slow shutter speed noise reduction. Plus, me personally, I don't love software noise reduction altogether. So there's that. But your mileage may vary. Shake reduction is the amazing feature this camera has that moves the sensor around as your hand shakes and corrects for it. You want to leave that on. If you want to do shots that are specifically blurry for a reason, or blurry in a certain direction or things like that, you want to turn this off, because then the camera won't be trying to undo your shaky business that you're doing intentionally. Horizon correction, I turn that off. Why? Because it crops your photo a little bit. What is horizon correction? If I turn it on, you will see that it will correct my horizon. If I'm a little crooked like this, and then I go to the main picture. Well, it didn't correct it here. But usually if there's a horizon in the image, it will detect it, and it will help you by doing tiny crops to keep your image straight. I keep that off. And with that, ladies and gents, we've gone through the entirety of the first section of the menu. Isn't that cool? We're going to skip over the, or at least only do it very quickly, the video menu. All right. So video is not very big with this camera, but I actually like it. If you do want to shoot video on this camera for some reason, here are the settings. Snap focus is just one focus. The entire time. You don't worry about the camera breathing with the focus or whatever. Same with infinity. Manual focus, a little tough when you're shooting. Autofocus, you know how that is. Snap focus distance, just like we had earlier. Snap focus in movie mode, it just means set focus. One focus. You know what focus peaking and manual focus automatic magnification and white balance and fine tuning, all of these things, you know exactly what they are. Frame rate. 30p is your internet frame rate. 24p is your movie maker's frame rate. 60p is your gamer's frame rate. Real quick, that's it. Sound recording, you can turn it on or off. Do you want sound in your video or do you not? Image control, this is the fun part. You can set a film simulation. You can shoot a black and white video. Why not? And that peripheral illumination correction that you turn off, dynamic range that you set on auto, and the movie shake reduction you can turn on or off. I leave it on because it's not actual shake reduction, it's software shake reduction. So it kind of gives you a cool look, unnecessary movement sometimes to your movies. These are my playback settings. Real quick, it's just about your playback menu, where your images are. So you can delete and rotate and copy and protect and transfer and stuff, but you can also do raw development here. If you take raw pictures, you can add a film simulation right on the camera onto it. You can do that through here. Resizing and cropping and levels adjustment and white balance adjustment. Do you want to mess with those in your camera after you've taken the picture? I mean, go for it. You know what I mean? But I don't mess with it, make it darker later. Make it, lighter. I do this stuff in my computer usually, but if you want to do them in your camera, you can. Go crop your photo. Look, you can use the display button to do a little tilt, right? You can crop in and look, it processes the image. I have a new image cropped and adjusted and everything. All right. Levels adjustment and white balance adjustments do the same thing. They apply it to the image that you've already taken. Base parameter adjustment. You can change your exposure, saturation. This only really works for JPEGs, by the way. Contrast and sharpness after the fact. Okay. Movie edit. You can do it. Well, I didn't shoot a movie here, but come on, don't edit your movies on your GR. I mean, you can do a little things, but it's not worth it. Just get on the computer. Auto image rotation, I always keep that off. Why? Because when I'm in my playback mode, I don't want the camera to turn things around when I do this. That's my image. Don't turn things for me. But if I turn it on, you'll see that the gyroscope activates and turns the picture for me. I just don't love that for a camera. I love it for my iPhone, but I don't love it for a camera. Playback order option. You can have it play it back in the order of shooting date and time or file number, which should be the same thing for most of you. And playback sound volume. That's it. Playback menu over. Custom menu is the fun one. Ladies and gents, this is where we can configure our custom settings, U1, U2, and U3. And it gives us those tools when, let's say, you have spent so much time configuring all this stuff, you just hit menu, hit custom, and you go hit save setting. And you can save your settings onto one of these custom dials, user 1, user 2, or user 3. All right. How does that work? We're going to go over it right now. Believe it or not. But you should see the other video for like what custom settings I recommend. But how to save the custom settings is very simple. Real easy, real simple. So let's say, for example, you're just having a good old time shooting some aperture priority, and you're like, man, I'm just f5.6ing all the way, and I love how the underexposed square, looks. I want to save this. So you go hit menu, you go to the C subsection for custom, and you hit save settings. And then you go pick one of these boxes. If you pick one of the top three, it'll assign it to one of these dials. If you pick one of these down here, it'll save it in your camera, and then you can pull it out later. You see what I mean? And then you pick one of these, and then you go save it. Well, I don't want to save mine right now, but I'll save the same thing over itself just so you can see the process. So menu, C subsection, save setting, we're in U1, so boom. And then you hit enter name. You can enter a name. It's touchscreen, right? So you enter whatever, right? I actually want to enter film look, so sorry for taking your time to type this on screen. Film. Let's just say film. Boom. And then you hit OK. And that's it. You've saved your setting. Now, next time I go back to U1, it's going to bring up exactly those settings. All right? So there's that. Now, of course, you can go in there and rename them after the fact too. So if you just want to go rename, you can do that as well. Well, we're not really doing it here, but there's that. What is recall? Recall is when you go and pull one of these settings. If I had more of them, you can assign the settings saved in the user mode box to the mode dial. So basically, if I had more than 3, and let's say I have one saved on that 4th one, let's say, boom, one of these things, I can use this recall setting to pull it from, let's say, box 4 into box 1, so I can dial into it. Okay, there's that. You can delete your settings if you want. The option is there. Mode dial settings. This is fun. It allows you to shift front, back, aperture, shutter speed to shutter speed aperture, if you're that kind of person. I'm not. I like aperture in the front, shutter speed on the back. Adjust mode setting. It allows you to customize what this adjust menu does. So when you're shooting, if you press the adjust menu, it brings up these shortcuts. You can customize that. How do you do that? You're in menu, under C, adjust mode settings. You go in and you can have up to 5 shortcuts. As you can see, I've turned off 2 of them and I've turned on the last 3. There's a ton of things you can choose for each of these. I recommend having just focus, image control, and outdoor view setting. Why? Because an uncluttered menu is a nice menu. So that's it. That's your adjust mode. That's how you bring up all those extra menus. You can set them here. If you want to have more, let's say you want to bring in a specific setting for, there you go, snap distance priority, that thing that we talked about earlier. Boom. I have it in there. If I want, I can just turn it on. Boom. Nice, easy access. So it's all about customization with this camera, and the adjust menu is one of those good things that you can customize. Okay, so there's that. The function button setting. This allows you to customize what this button does, but also eventually what this button does and more things. Let's go into that menu. Okay, the function button, you can tell the camera what to do when you press this function button. I have it to set it to snap mode. Why? Because I like it. Another one I recommend is set to manual focus. Why is this helpful? Let's talk about it real quick. If I have it on set to manual focus, I can get a focus that I like, right? And press the function button, which takes me to manual focus, which locks that focus now. Look, I can half press. Because I'm in manual focus, I'm not going to focus. and my focus is exactly where I want it, and I can just go ahead and take my shot at that focus. All right, so that's why it's useful to set this to manual focus or snap. Either one. Snap is different because it will snap to a different focus. So snap won't work for that feature I just mentioned for saving your focus, but it's another useful one to have. You can change what your ISO button does. I wouldn't. You can change what your drive button does. I wouldn't. You know what I would change? Is the movie wireless button, because you don't need it for movie shooting. I don't really shoot a ton of movies on this. And you don't need it for turning on and off the wireless, because pressing and holding the playback button does the same thing. So what do we use this button for? Two things. Number one, crop if pressed once. Number two, my HDF filter. Or you can set it to your ND filter if that's the version of the camera that you have. So if I press and hold this, it puts on the HDF filter. And if I press and hold this again, it takes it off. Focus setting. This is one of those like pro features. If you have set your function button to be the focus button, then you can set here what kind of focus it will do, or if it will do the same kind of focus as what you have set as your main focus, which is what the shutter button does, which is what I leave it on. So there's that. A little complicated, but don't worry about it. Leave it on shutter. Keep AE lock. I turn that off because I want to just in the moment, I usually just use this dial to in the moment just dial in my auto exposure compensation and just call it. One push AE in M mode. This is one push auto exposure in manual mode. So if you're in manual mode and you want to just quickly get an auto exposure, you can choose whether it will be done through program, auto exposure, aperture priority auto exposure, or shutter priority auto exposure. You can see you can get really detailed with this camera. I don't worry about that. I never even bother being in that kind of a situation, so we'll leave that. Shutter button setting. This is what your shutter button does when you half press it. Is it enable AF? Is it no AF? Do you want it to not focus here? You just leave it on AE lock and it's just for your exposure, or you want it to do both, or you want it to just do focus. You see, half press just focus, half press no focus, just auto exposure, half press focus and auto exposure lock. All right. I want it to just focus. The 4-way controller setting is a weird one. I don't recommend messing with it too much. Basically, when you're in shooting mode, and let's just get back to my auto mode here. Basically, when you're in shooting mode, your 4 points of direction here do 4 different things, right? That's macro mode, right? That's white balance settings. This is ISO. And that's your drive mode, right? However, if you press OK, then all of a sudden, if you press OK, then all of a sudden it becomes what moves your focus zone. So those become direction pads, and then you press OK again. It changes that. So, but rather than pressing OK while you're doing this, you can have it be preset to one or the other. A bit of redundancy, in my opinion, here. Shutter button confirmation on. I like that. That's this. Yeah, of course, shutter button confirmation. Touch LCD operation. I think that's good to keep on, so you can do things like this, right? We have Touch AF. This is a very interesting feature. You can touch to choose your AF point, or you can touch to choose your AF point and focus, which will be like this. There you go. You can touch to choose your AF point and focus and shoot, which is that. Just takes a shot with a touch. You can full press snap. When it's so many options, which means your preset snap distance at 2.5 meters is what it will shoot when you press. really fast shooting, or you can just turn off the touching features. I like it to select the focus point. All right. Memory over here. What do you want the camera to remember every time you turn it off and turn it back on? Pretty much everything, so I leave that on. Shooting info display is fun. This is what you see when you're shooting. If you're a kind of guy who wants to see a lot of stuff while you're shooting, getting in the way of your image, go ahead and turn every one of these on. So you use the direction pad to go through, and you use the adjust button to select. You have 3 different pages, basically, potentially, right? Originally. And it's clear. It's a little bit of data. Let me just change it so I can show you what it is. You got confirm. Okay, so you got a little bit of data, no data, a lot of data. A little bit of data, no data, a lot of data, right? You could also have a screen off mode if you'd like. That way it's a lot of data, a little bit of data, no data, off. A lot of data, a little bit of data, no data, off. And then back. You get it. I don't need all those. I just like a little bit and none. So for me, it's, oops, I gotta confirm. Boom. I don't like the screen off or the massive amounts of data. So I just have a little bit or none. And you cycle through them by pressing the display button. Okay. Playback info display is kind of the same vibe, but for your playback menu, I don't mess with any of these. I don't want to see a histogram or a grid guide or a highlight alert when I'm trying to review my images, just so you see what that's like. I'm sorry I'm doing this to you, but you should be aware. Boom. That's what you get. Lines all over it, and you can press and it brings data, and that's the best preview you can get of your image. I'm not into all that. So turn them off. Instant review. You turn it off. That's when you take a picture and then instantly it shows it to you. Why would you want that? Quick zoom. Don't worry about it. That's like, take the picture and then you quickly zoom in on it after you're viewing it. This is all, for viewing stuff. Grid style. If you want to put a grid on your image, you can choose to have a 4x4 or a 3x3 grid. I like 3x3 grids. I don't even have the grid on, so we're not worrying about it. Electronic level type. You have tilt and level, or you have just level. You have a few different styles or designs for it. Type 1 has the bottom of the screen level right there, horizontal. Type 2, bottom of the screen with a vertical line for the level. And type 3 is in the middle of the screen with a horizontal line. All right, just different designs. Flicker reduction is for screens, 50 or 60 hertz. You can choose. I don't bother with that. And last but not least, the menu of the menu, the setting menu, the setting of the settings. All right, you go to the gear icon down here, and up the top, you can format your memory card or your internal memory of your camera. You can create a new folder in your SD card if you want for like a new project. Why do that? Folder name can be changed. File names can have a custom extension. You can choose whether to have sequential numbering or not. You can reset the numbering of your files. You can put copyright information. I highly recommend doing that. Store cursor position is best left on. What is that? That's when you're like shooting and you were just in the menu and you want to go back to the menu and it goes straight back to where you were. Yeah, that. Leave that on. Guide display. I leave that on. What is that? That's this thing that pops up. It tells you all this stuff. Yeah, I like it. When you shift your mode, it tells you what mode you're in. Why not? Animation setting. That's when you like swipe through a photo that you're reviewing and it just swipes. I turn it off. I don't need that. End screen. You have one type where it just shows you the number of shots you took today, and you have type 2, which shows you the shots today, the total shots on the camera, as well as the firmware version that you're on. I leave it on type 1. LCD settings, you can change the color balance of your LCD if you're into that. Outdoor view settings, it's the same thing as what you have on your quick menu here. I'm going to go back to normal mode, which brightens your screen if you're outside or If it's really dark, darkens your screen. Power button lamp is for this guy up here. If I turn it on, you'll see there's a little green light. We can turn that off. Countdown is for when you do self-timer shots. It uses that green light in the front to flash a bunch of times before it's about to go off. I leave it off. I don't need flashing green lights. Sound effects, shutter sound only. Yes, please. No beeping buttons on my camera, but if you want, you can put it on all. And volume, I just put it on 0. I leave mine on 0. If you'd like to have a fake shutter sound, you can turn that on. Bluetooth setting is interesting. I recommend leaving it either on disabled if you just don't use Bluetooth, connecting this to your phone for transferring images, remote shooting, and stuff like that at all, or on when power is on. Because if you put it on any time, it's just going to drain your battery. So I do use the phone connection quite often for transferring images, so I use on when power is on. And you can pair it and stuff. That deserves an entire separate video for the whole wireless LAN stuff and the smartphone link. But real quick, if you're using the app, might as well store location information, so you turn that on. Auto image transfer, yeah, why not? You turn it on. Auto resize is interesting. It's for the kind of folks that like to, let's say, have full-size images on the SD card, but also transfer extra small versions of the same files to their phone wirelessly. Yeah, you can turn this on if that's what you want to do. And image transfer while off. Very self-explanatory. I leave that on because if I start an image transfer with Bluetooth while the camera is on and I go turn it off because I don't want to shoot anymore, I want that transfer to continue. All right. Auto power off and sleep mode are not the same. Auto power off completely shuts down the whole thing. Sleep mode puts it to sleep. You know how those things are. You can choose what amounts of time it takes for either one of those. Auto LCD dim, I always leave that on because the LCD is the most power consuming part of this whole thing probably. So if I'm holding it like this and talking, I want the LCD to start dimming. Firmware info and options, you can, look at your firmware certification marks, very cool marks. Pixel mapping, that's when you see on your picture reviews where there's like dead pixels, and you can use the pixel mapping feature to do that. Not enough battery to maintain pixel mapping, so let's not bother with that. Dust removal shakes the sensor for you to remove some dust. You can change your language, date adjustment, and reset. I think we've done it, ladies and gents. This is the entire menu of the Ricoh GR. It's a great camera. I don't think I covered absolutely everything, but I think I covered nearly everything. And for the parts I missed, I'm sorry. Please visit Ricoh, and hopefully that will do the trick for you. But otherwise, I thank you so much for sitting through this video with me. I hope this was helpful. If somebody out there really needs detailed deep dive, I guess, into the menu system of the Ricoh GR. And if you like what you're seeing, hit the like button. If you want to see more of this stuff as I post them, hit the subscribe button. Thank you for tuning in. See you later.